Hey everybody, here we go again. Here we go again. Gonna do a video. Here we go again. That was my rapping for the day. That's about as much as I can handle. Okay, kitties. Open your books to page. Okay, this is what I can't stand. I can't stand that on the beginning of a module, the page does not have a number. Look at the top of your stuff. It's 393. I have to look at 392 to see what page, and then I have to do addition in my head. Now, let me just get this out of the way. I don't like math. I mean, it's okay. I can do it. I just don't like to do it. So that's what makes it difficult. Okay, we're skipping a little bit. Are we? No, we just did module 12. See, I'm getting all confused because this is for the 25th, January 25th, and today is actually the 13th. So I'm trying to get as much done before I have surgery as I can. That's tomorrow. So anyway, I'm going to try to get a couple lessons knocked out, and that'll get you set up until February. Okay, here we go. Page 393. Okay, we're going to be talking about, again, the animal kingdom. We're in the animal kingdom right now. Module 13, we're going to talk about the phylum Chordata. And it's kind of, I mean, it's exactly what it sounds like. There's no kind of to it. Chordata, think of cord, spinal cord, a cord like their back, okay? Most of phylum Chordata are vertebrates. And vertebrate means that this animal has a backbone. Now, some backbones are more defined than others. It's easy to know, I mean, because we're people, we know that we have a backbone. A horse, a dog, a fish. We've seen fish backbones. We're familiar with the things that we have seen. But what about the things that we're not as familiar with? I mean, we're going to talk about a couple of creatures today I bet you may not have even heard of before. So that's what we're going to do, okay? Not all members, remember I said most have a vertebrae, but not all members have it. Some creatures in this phylum have what's called a notochord. A notochord, it's one of your vocabulary words here. It's not an obvious backbone. I mean, it's a backbone, but it's not an obvious backbone. A notochord is a rod of tough, flexible material that runs the length of the creature's body, providing the majority of its support. So it's that long kind of backbone that provides support for the creature. All members of this phylum Chordata have a notochord at some point in their life. Now, there's 3 different kinds of creatures and the 3 different kinds of notochords that they might have. Look down in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th paragraph, 3 sentences in. In the subphylum Urochordata, that contains creatures that have a notochord through the larva stage, but then once they get to the adult stage, it goes away, it disappears. Then we have Cephalochordata. That is organisms that have the notochord their entire life. Third is Vertebrata. Vertebratas are made up of those vertebrae that have a notochord during early development, and then it turns into a true backbone. So Urochord has one, and in the larva stage, and then, I mean, you'd have to be a larva first, of course, and during the larva stage, they have one, but then they grow out of it, okay? The Cephalochorda has it its whole life. We're going to talk about a little word that might help you trigger a memory on that. And then you have the vertebrata who have it early on, and then that notochord develops into the vertebrae. and typically develops the spinal cord as well, the nervous system. All members of this phylum have a dorsal nerve cord. Now, remember that ventral means on the belly. Dorsal means on the back. Now, we haven't really gone over this yet. We won't go over it till the latter part of this this module. But sharks and fish, you know, the fin that sticks up out of the water for a shark, that's its dorsal fin. So dorsal means on the back, all right? And ventral means on the front or on the belly. Let's turn to page 394, and we're going to talk about the Urochordata first. Okay, one creature that is a great example of Urochordata is a sea squirt. That sounds like a really fun name. I want to see me a sea squirt. Remember that notochords that Urochordata have a notochord in the larva stage, but as they become more mature, they grow out of it. Look at the picture of the life cycle of your sea squirt here. On the left, you're going to see a mature sea squirt. On the right, looks like a tadpole. But if you look at it here, it says it has a dorsal nerve cord. That's its nervous system going down right above. It's going to be on the back, so it's going to be above that notochord. Now, if we go down, what happens is these sea squirts attach to the bottom of the sea. To the bottom of the sea, Nemo. So once it attaches to the bottom, it starts developing into an adult. And remember that up here where it looks like a tadpole, that's the larval stage. So once it's developing, it starts to lose that notochord. So you can see in the picture where it goes from the tadpole, not really a tadpole, but it goes down. You can see that it still has some of its notochord. Then, once it attaches, those changes start happening to where it turns into an adult. It develops more things to feed, and it develops new ways to have support and movement. So over here on the left-hand side, you'll see that it says a pharynx. A pharynx, that's something that they can swallow past, but this is really cool. See how it's got that oral opening at the top? And on the left, it has an atrial opening. This is exciting. What happens is, kind of like we talked about with the sponges, water with all these little creatures and fungus and little microscopic sea plants, water comes into that oral opening. Then it's digested inside of its little gut there, and then the nutrients are absorbed, and the rest of the water is pushed out through that atrial opening. That is pretty cool. That is an example of a Urochordata that starts as in the larval stage. It has its notochord, but as it moves along, that notochord disappears. Look over on page 395. This is a Cephalochordata. It keeps its notochord its whole life. That's what it has as a backbone. It doesn't look like a normal structural backbone. So let's look here at figure 13.2. This is a lancelet. Once again, dorsal nerve cord runs along the top of its back, and right below that is its notochord. This will stay a notochord. It will not grow out of it. It will always have this form for structure, okay? Let's see, this section, I made a note for myself to read this, okay? These lancelets are usually less than 3 inches long. They possess a dorsal nerve cord along with a notochord that makes it part of this subphylum. Its sensory organs are not as sophisticated as those found in most creatures of this phylum. As a result, it tends to spend the majority of its time buried in the sand. It takes food in by filtering out phytoplankton and zooplankton in the water. Now, the next paragraph. Water is drawn into this creature by it beating the cilia located just inside the mouth. This water is first filtered through the oral cilia, which clean it of large undigestible debris like the sand in which it's buried. As the water passes through the pharynx, it travels through little slits like those in the sea squirt. The food particles in the water are trapped in those slits, and the water flows out through the atrial cavity, similar to the sea squirt. The food particles that have been trapped in the slits of the pharynx are sent into the gut where they're digested. Any undigested remains leaves through the anus. That sounds familiar too. Turn the page. Bing! Turn the page. Page 396. We are moving right along, y'all. Only 11 minutes in. Yeah! 11 minutes in. Okay, if you'll set it down, I'll get it later. All right, now we're going to talk about subphylum Vertebrata. That sounds more familiar. That may be something that we can recognize pretty easily. There are many, many different creatures in this subphylum, and we're going to specifically talk about them in Module 16. But we're going to talk about some of the characteristics of a vertebrata. All right? Unlike arthropods, which support their body with the exoskeleton, vertebrates get their bodily support from an endoskeleton. What's a skeleton? It's the bony frame that gives you support, okay? What does endo mean? It means inside. Exo means out, endo means in. That's one of the first things you're going to learn in biology too. So, endoskeleton is the skeleton on the inside of a creature's body, typically composed of bone or cartilage. Now, let's see here. There are different parts that make this skeletal structure. We have what's called a bone matrix. Now, we're going to be looking at a vertebral bone here in just a second, but there are 3 types of bone cells in the bone matrix. That the bone matrix is all the good stuff that comes together and forms bone. So we have what's called osteoblasts, osteocytes, and osteoclasts. Okay, class, not like class, like we're in a class, classed. I'm East Tennessee, and I eliminate a lot of letters from my words. So, osteoblasts, the first part of it, anytime you see the prefix osteo, that's going to be bone. Blast means build. I think we might have talked about that before. I get biology 1 and biology 2 confused. The blast means build. Build, blast, build. Bone builders. That's what those cells do. They create new bone. Then let's look at osteoclast. That means they break down. So osteoclasts are cells that help break the bone down. And you'll learn in biology too, that's very important for the health of a bone, is that we have cells that build and we have cells that break down. Then osteocytes are, osteo means bone, cyte means cell. It is a mature bone cell. Excuse me. I had me a COVID test the other day, because you have to have COVID test before you go to surgery. They said they'll only call if it's positive. So I have not had a phone call, so I'm assuming I'm negative. But I have coughed and I've had allergies, and so I knew when I went in there, I was thinking, I'm going to have the Rona. And then they won't be able to do my surgery. I got the Rona. So apparently I don't, but I'm still coughing like I do. Praise God I don't. Okay. So now that we are talking about the endoskeleton, let's look at what part of that endoskeleton looks like. That's your vertebral bone. Now this looks like a very typical bone. right? It looks like it's probably your femur, the bone, the large bone in your leg. This kind of looks like a fake, not really. Maybe the long bone in your arms. Looks more like them. But anyway, we don't know what bone this is. This is just a good representation. But let's start with what each of these parts mean. Did you know that there is a lot of blood go into your bone and out of your bone? Did you know that your bones make your blood? They make your blood. It's a lot of fun. Okay? So there's lots of blood vessels around your bone. And I'll tell you a really cool thing too here in just a second. Underneath that, there is a compact bone tissue. This is very hard. It is the hard part of your bones. It is the part that gives you the most support, and it protects and supports the stuff that's going on inside of that bone. Let's go up to the top, to the very end where it says spongy bone tissue. This looks like a sponge. There's all kinds of little holes in there. It's spongy looking and porous. And the reason that it is because it helps grow new bone cells. Until you get to be old and you don't grow anymore, these will be real spongy and porous, and that'll allow all of those new bone cells to grow and build on top so that your bone can extend. Let's look on the inside here. There is a cavity. It's up at the very top, cavity containing bone marrow. Right below the spongy bone, surrounded by the compact bone, is a little channel that contains the bone marrow. Okay, that's really cool. So the bone marrow, is listed on the bottom, is soft tissue inside of that little canal that helps make your blood cells. That's really cool. It helps produce all those really cool blood cells. Primarily, primarily your red blood cells, okay? Now, let's talk about the periosteum. Periosteum means, y'all remember I told you a minute ago? Means bone. Osteum, osteo, bone. Peri means around. So the periosteum is the membrane that surrounds the outside of the bone. It's called the around bone. Does that make sense? Now, the periosteum has lots of blood vessels around it. And if you break a bone, this is so cool. Okay, let's say this is your bone, and you break your bone right here, and it goes crack. The first thing that's going to happen is that around bone, that periosteum, ruptures because there's been a break there. It's kind of like if you crack an egg. If you put it on the countertop and it goes crack, it's going to have a crack in it and stuff is going to leak out, right? So same thing with your bone. Right here's the bone, and it breaks or it cracks. Well, those blood vessels and that periosteum are fractured. They are broken. So the blood vessels, what happens when you break a blood vessel? You bleed. And when you bleed, then what happens is your body senses that bleeding and it says, hey, I got to get to that spot because I don't want this person to bleed to death. So what happens is all the blood from these little blood vessels collects there and they clot together. Little platelets form that they clot together. And when they clot, they create a little form around the broken part. You might see from the outside a bruise where blood is oozed out under the skin. But one thing you have for sure is pain. You've got that broken bone and you're going to have pain with it. And all the little nerves and blood vessels assure that that happens. But really cool, also what happens is as your body notices that it's broken, you'll start sending calcium in the blood, nutrition to this broken part. And if it's just a crack, it'll heal perfectly and the crack will be filled in with all the nutrients from the blood that's coming to it. That's amazing. I just can't imagine that anything but God could do that. Now, you might have a severe fracture, and in that case, the doctor might have to pop it back together. Even if the doctor didn't pop it back together, I broke my collarbone when I was 12 years old. I was playing football and I got tackled and I landed on my shoulder and the collarbone went like this. Well, they couldn't get it to pop all the way back. So my collarbone still has this, but right here all around it, there's a big, I don't know if you could see it. Yeah, there's a big knot there. I was 12. That was a couple years ago. There it is, right there. There's a knot where you can feel that bone is still elevated, but the whole thing by now has wrapped with these calcium forms and started to grow new bone. So there's a big knot of bone around that area. Now, I've seen people that before modern medicine really was a part of people's lives, I've seen them break their leg and their leg be shorter because the bone didn't set right, and so they limp and their leg is shorter and they have problems, but their leg is still bound together by all of those nutrients that came in to heal itself. Pretty cool, huh? Okay, bones are pretty amazing. I just love it. Oh, let's turn the page to 398. My nose is running again. I swear I don't know what y'all do without getting to see me blow my nose. Every time we were in class, blow and wipe my nose out. That's pretty. All right, now, another thing, this is the human endoskeleton. Oh, I love it. Okay, look at the purple part. Head, neck, spinal cord, ribs. That is called the axial skeleton. Now, I bet you that most of you have no idea about cars. I guess when I was a freshman or 10th grade, I didn't know much about them either. But if you bust the axle on your car, you're not going anywhere. It is the main frame of your car. It's the main, most important part. If it's busted, your car's done, okay? Your axial, which sounds like the axle of a car, your axial skeleton, it covers all of your vital organs. If you did not have an axial skeleton, you're done. You have to have a skull to be able to support your brain. If you took the skull completely off your brain, all you would have is brain and goo. It would fall forward. There'd be no support to it. It would fall forward and you would have brain damage and you would die. Your ribs, that encases your heart, lung, liver, spleen, pancreas, and stomach. Yeah, those are important things, especially them heart and lungs. Gotta have those. Also, these little tiny ribs in the back help protect your kidneys. Gotta have those kidneys. Then you have what's called your appendicular skeleton. Appendicular means like an appendage, something that hangs off of something else. Well, let's look at it. I see arms and legs and hips. Now, you cannot live without your axial skeleton being intact. You cannot live that way. You can have fractures in your spine and live, but most of the time when that happens, you have damage to that nerve cord. The reason I'm telling you all this is the axial skeleton is imperative for life. The appendicular skeleton, you can live without an arm, you can live without a leg, you can live without a hand or feet. You will live. So that's the difference between the two. Axial skeleton is vital, and appendicular, it's helpful, but you can live without it. Okay, page 399. We have a closed circulatory system. Animals in the vertebrates, the vertebrata, have a closed skeletal system. Um, what that means is the blood is contained in vessels within our body. So you remember how we talked about open circulatory systems, how like with that crayfish, the blood went through vessels and dumped out over the organs, and then the organs absorbed the nutrients. Well, in here, you have blood vessels that go to every major organ. You have blood vessels that go to every single part of your body. So that's pretty stinking cool. And that it's like a little railway system. Blood is delivered and blood is returned. So when what we're talking about with our closed system is we have arteries. Arteries carry blood away from the heart to vital organs and the furthest points of our body, our fingertips, our scalp, even our toes. So arteries deliver blood away from the heart. Veins bring blood back in to the heart. So it's delivered out and then it comes back. Delivers out through arteries, comes back in veins. Now, this is important. Where does that exchange happen from going out to coming back? It happens in these tiny little vessels called capillaries. They are eensy weensy teeny weeny, okay? So, one of the best ways to tell how that's called your circulation, because it goes down, circles around, and comes back. Well, one of the ways to tell if you had good circulation is by checking your nail beds. Now, I'm going to try to get as close as I can. I have a little boo-boo on my nail, so I hate that. And it hurts too. I had a dry piece of skin, and like me, I can't let go of nothing, so I start yanking on it, and that's what happens. Okay, so watch my fingernails. See how I'm going to hide that. I'm going to hide them. Oh, that's bad. We'll just do it. I'll do it anyway. I'll let y'all see my little boo-boos. So you'll see that the nail bed is pink. Now what happens when I pinch it? It turns white. I'm squeezing those little tiny capillaries, and in squeezing those little tiny capillaries, I'm pushing the blood out of them. Now watch. It turned pink really quickly. Now, for somebody who has bad circulation, I can pinch that and it turns white. I ain't gonna do it. I keep on flipping y'all off. No, me too. And if I wasn't doing it bad, anyway, my son, I have a little boy that when he was a baby, he always pointed with his middle finger and it looked like he was flipping people off. Oh, there he is right there, my middle finger pointer. So it was awful. He used to point at everything all over with his middle finger. And we used to get tickled at him, but we had to stop him because it really did start to look inappropriate. So anyway, and we had 8 kids, it's bad enough. So when people have bad circulation, you can pinch theirs, and a lot of times the blood doesn't fill back quickly. So we call that sluggish refill. And that lets us know a lot of times if people are having trouble to make sure that they have blood flow going to that part of their body. Let's say I got a big cut on my arm and I had to go to the hospital to be stitched up. The hospital might look at my fingers and go, oh, that's not feeling in. She's not getting blood flow to her hand. So the first thing that they need to do is restore that blood flow to my hand so that I can have a healthy circulatory pattern and my hand doesn't fall off and die. Okay, so we've talked about arteries, talked about capillaries, talked about veins. Now let's talk about that stuff that those bones produce. They produce red blood cells. Now, this is really cool. There's a red blood cell. Looks like that. You have your red blood cell, and this red blood cell holds a protein called hemoglobin. That's funky looking, isn't it? So, in the hemoglobin, the red blood cells hold this hemoglobin, and the hemoglobin is held together with an iron molecule, atom, an iron atom, and then that holds on to oxygen. And that's how oxygen is transported throughout your body by the attraction through the iron, which is attraction to the hemoglobin, and It's actually attracted to the heme inside the hemoglobin. But the hemoglobin is this funky little cell that has hemes, iron, and oxygen in them. And that's part of the red blood cell. Pretty cool. Okay, now let's look at the nervous system. Vertebrates have the most complex nervous system in all of creation. Think about all that we can do. Amazing. And all that we can process in our brain. Your brain is part of your nervous system. It's amazing. So, figure 13.5 is a typical vertebrate nervous system. Now, to me, this looks like some kind of crazy bug, but it's just giving you an example of how your vertebral system, your nervous system through the JC, no bark. No bark. She wants to go outside. JC, Annie, get her. Get her now. Get her.
What?
Oh, my goodness. It's one thing after another. Just put it right here, please. Okay. Sorry, guys. This is how it goes when we're at home. It kind of goes this way when we're at school sometimes too, doesn't it? Okay. So here we go. The vertebral nervous system is made up of typically a brain. This is a picture of the cerebrum, which is a part of the brain, the olfactory lobes, which help us smell, octave lobes that help us see, the cerebrum, the medulla oblongata. These are all important parts of the brain that you will learn in biology too. Then we have this elongated spinal cord. All right? Hush. Then we have spinal nerves that branch off and go to additional axon nerves that nerve cells that triggers organs and muscle movement. The nervous system is controlled by the brain. Most vertebrate brains are segmented into 5 different lobes. The olfactory, that's your smell. The cerebrum, that's an inner part. The optic lobes, which help you see. The cerebellum and the medulla oblongata. Okay? Now, let's go over to reproduction on page 401. In all vertebrates, sexes are separate. There is a male and a female. Sexes are separate in all vertebrates. There is internal fertilization and external fertilization. The vocabulary words are at the very bottom of the page. The process by which a male places sperm inside of the female's body where the eggs are fertilized is internal fertilization. That makes sense. Then external fertilization is the process by which the female lays eggs and then the male fertilizes them once it's already outside of the female's body. Let's look at page 402. Reproduction in subphylum Vertebrata is even more diverse because once fertilization occurs, development takes place in one of these 3 ways. One is oviparous. Oviparous is when the development occurs in an egg and the egg hatches outside of the body. Okay? It's when the development occurs, the development of the creature occurs inside the egg, but then the egg hatches outside of the body. That is oviparous. An example of this would be a bird. Okay? The next one is, I never say this right, ovoviviparous. Ovoviviparous. That is just too long of a word. It's when the development happens in the egg and it's hatched inside the body. And that is an example of that would be guppies. Guppies have eggs inside, but the egg hatches after the creature is developed inside. Then you have viviparous. Viviparous is when the development happens inside the female, and it allows offspring to gain nutrients and vital substances from the mother through a placenta. So what starts as an egg breaks open, like with people and animals. What starts with an egg inside of the female, the egg is fertilized, and the egg splits and grows. And as it grows, it's not really a hatch. As it grows, it develops a yolk and a yolk sac. And eventually, after about 7 weeks, that baby with its little yolk sac will attach to a uterus, and the uterus will then form a placenta, and that placenta will become its amniotic sac, where inside that placenta will be the amniotic sac, where they'll get all of their nutrients and have their blood supply through that placenta. It connects through the belly button. Remember the umbilical cord. So, let's see. Now we're going to look at the very last thing we'll discuss today. This is class. So we have gone through phylum, subphylum. This is phylum Chordata. We've gone through different subphylums, the Urochordata, the Cephalochordata, and the Vertebrata. And now we're looking at a class. This is part of subphylum Vertebrata, and its class Agnatha, commonly called the jawless fish, a creature that is part of this class, is often called Anadromedus. Okay, this is a lamprey, and it is freaky, y'all. Anadromedus is a life cycle in which creatures are hatched in fresh water. They migrate to salt water as adults, and then they go back to freshwater to reproduce. So when it's time to reproduce, they go back to freshwater. But once they're hatched, they go to sea, and then they come back. Really cool stuff here. Okay, this is a lamprey. A lamprey lives in freshwater, and the rest I'm sorry, let me go back just a little bit. The most common example of a creature from class Agnatha is the lamprey. Eel, it's an eel. In the figure below, there are 3 views of an adult lamprey as shown. Look at that thing's mouth. Ugh. It latches onto stuff. Get it? It latches onto things. And its little teeth work like this to saw a little hole to grab on and suck the life out of it. Great. Some lampreys live in fresh water, and the rest are anadromedous, meaning that they go out to the sea. When lamprey eggs hatch, the young are in larval form, and they're called amicetes. While in larva stage, the young behave and look very different from their adult form. They feed by producing strands of mucus that trap food particles floating in the water. So they put out this snot that traps food and stuff, and then they suck it back in. They live as larvae for as many as 7 years until metamorphosis takes place. Ugh. They're snot suckers for almost 7 years. Then again, I've had a few kids that were snot suckers till 7. Okay. As an adult, the lamprey have a round sucker-like jaw with horned teeth and a raspy tongue. So the ringed teeth twist and hold on to something, and its raspy tongue drills a little hole to get in and get some blood. It sucks the blood out, and it's a parasite. Yuck. Whenever a lamprey catches onto something, it mostly dies. So, the next page gives you a little bit more information about the lamprey, and it goes through 13.14 on your own. So, I'm doing this into 2 lessons. So the next time that we get together, which here will be in just a few minutes, but with you it'll be next week. So I'm going to end this video now. Class time is about 40 minutes, and go ahead and get those on your own done. Go ahead and start working on that. And then next time we will talk about our test, and we will discuss some fish and sharks. Okay, so I'll see you here in a few minutes. Hashtag next week.